Hello everyone and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
We saw The Red Turtle separately. It was out a few months ago, back in the summer, and then the Electric Cinema have been showing various films from throughout the year. They've been bringing them back for the Christmas period. And I caught it at the cinema, which I was glad to.
Yes.
Because I missed it the first time. You weren't. I wanted to surprise you at the cinema, because you said, I'll see it on Tuesday.
I know, I'm sorry.
And then I showed up instead of seeing Dunkirk.
Yeah, I've just been working so all out that then it was almost like that day is just the day I crashed.
Yeah.
And so I stayed home bundled up. I was lucky enough that it was available on Amazon, and it just kind of made me think of the differences again of, watching it on a big screen or watching it at home, and, the advantages and disadvantages of each. I do claim that it's a different experience, really.
Oh, yeah.
For me, watching on a big screen, the audience reaction, the ability to be immersed in it, the lack of a pause button, those are not just like minor differences. I think they're really fundamental differences in watching a film. On the other hand, it cost the same to buy it as a screening at the Electric would have cost.
$9.50.
Yeah, this was like £9 something to buy it. And then, of course, the thing is that you could fast forward and backtrack and see it over and over again. And, so
yeah.
It's not quite horses for courses. I do think it's a different experience. And one of the things that was telling was that in spite of my best intentions, it took me about 3 hours to see the film today, right? It's an hour and 20 minutes long, right? Yeah. And I'd watch for 10 minutes and then, the phone would ring, and I'd watch for 10 minutes and then I'd make a coffee, and it's just... And
it's an impoverished experience.
It is a bit of an impoverished experience, and I kept saying, turn everything off and just watch it, and I would try, and then something would intervene, right? So I'm also wondering to what extent I'm now kind of absorbed in a victim of instant kind of phone clicks and bings, and like every time.
But that's kind of why that's why you go to one of the reasons you go to the cinema is because you turn off your phone there. And you say, for the next hour and a half, 2 hours, I'm not going to be disturbed. I give myself to the film.
I know, but then that just makes it a question of willpower,
Well, at home it does. I don't think it does at the cinema.
Yeah.
At the cinema, it's a matter of politeness to turn your phone off.
Yeah. Well, at the cinema you do it, but But what I'm trying to establish is that I think the difference in experience is much more than one of just willpower. Yeah. So I think it affects your senses differently. Anyway, there you go. I just thought that was worth mentioning.
No, you're absolutely right. It's not just a case of... the differences aren't just about whether you're distracted or not. It's a qualitatively different experience sitting in a cinema and the whole experience being dedicated to the film.
Yes.
And, sitting in a darkened room... Yeah, I mean, it's tough to describe it, and you're there with other people. That's well, theoretically you're there with other people. Although sitting in an empty cinema is an experience unto itself as well.
Yes, it is. Anyway, what did you think of The Red Turtle?
I thought it was extremely beautiful to look at. I'd never seen a Ghibli film before.
Had you not?
I know about them. Right, I know their reputation.
I've seen them all,
but I'd not seen one. And this isn't directed by Hayao Miyazaki. So it's under the studio, but it's directed by this guy Michael Dudok de Wit.
Yes,
a Dutch animator. This is his first feature, I think.
Yes. And it's a co-production. It was interesting looking at the credits actually, because you have Belgium and France and UK and Japan kind of all put money in this, really. Which I think is interesting. It's kind of an interesting comment on the reach of Studio Ghibli. It's really like
true, yeah.
An internationally loved series of works that is not American. And I think that's important.
Yeah, although it kind of occurs to me that level of involvement from so many different places is. To an extent, what you'd expect, like the way a film like this gets made, really, that kind of spreading of the risk amongst so many different investors across so many different countries, it doesn't seem that unusual to me, I guess. Or I didn't.
Well, I suppose it's become kind of the norm, really. Though I think it's more the norm outside the industries of the big industries of the U.S., India, and China. Then so I mean, I think for other countries, like when you see a Spanish film or whatever, it's almost a given that it'll have money from various European sources of financing. A Latin American film will have various sources of financing, including European ones, etc.
Yeah.
But American films do, on the whole, tend to be financed.
American entirely.
With American
well, there'll be probably different companies involved, but they'll all be American.
That's
Whereas
right.
it's like, well, really, I suppose the rest of the world, maybe excluding Japan, the rest of the world doesn't really have a film industry big enough to finance huge films on their own.
Not anymore. They used to.
Yeah.
Or many used to anyway.
This isn't a huge film. This is, well, I don't know what the budget was, but
I don't know what
it doesn't
budget
strike me as huge.
Yeah.
I wonder if we can find out.
Give
Give me just a second. The Red Turtle budget. See if we can find anything. No clue as to the budget really. I mean, it will have been small, but no clue how small. There is. I've found a little bit of information as to the box office, which seems to be around $6.5 million worldwide.
Not very much.
Which is not very much, but probably made its money back. And will continue to do so on DVD. This kind of film tends to.
Yes,
and video on demand.
Though we should talk about that actually, because it's an odd animated film.
In what way?
Because I think at the moment, animation tends to be aimed either at children specifically, or at the whole family, right? With all that implies. And this, I think, is really kind of an adult film. It's a film that actually I can't imagine, children...
Tolerating or enjoying?
No, I can imagine them tolerating it, but I can't imagine... It's not addressed to children, I don't think.
It's not addressed, and that's for sure. I think you're right that animated films these days are heavily aimed towards children and families. I think the real... the thing about them is that they tend to be very pop culture savvy. I think they're full of references, or they're adaptations of or based on things that are kind of pre-existing. Whereas this is an entirely original film about a guy who goes to an island. There's nothing really. There's no particular referencing or kind of building upon previous sources in the way that something like Shrek or Toy Story or the big ones do.
Well, the thing about this film that I think makes it stand out for me, from those, and I don't know if you remember one of the discussions that we had about the Lego movie, is that this film is not trying to sell you anything. Whereas actually, I think all of those animated films, they're all trying to sell you something.
That's a much better way of putting it, yeah.
So I think kind of what this film is trying to communicate to you feels pure, really. It's kind of tried to convey an idea and a feeling and a mood, and it does, and I think it does so very beautifully. I was kind of enchanted by it, really. I have some quibbles at the end, which we might talk. But one of the things that impressed me is that the film just seems so poetic. It's dealing with kind of the ineffable. It's a film that's entirely without dialogue, so it's full of sound. It's full of sounds of the sea and of the wind and
animals.
Yeah, and animals and people howling, right, or in rage or frustration or whatever. But there's no words.
Yeah, he says "hey" at one point. That's as close as he gets to a sentence.
Right. Yeah. So the film is basically kind of trying to convey all that it is trying to convey, basically through a very poetic use of imagery. There's no other way of putting it, really. And I thought it was very beautiful and moving.
So let's just clarify what the story is really, because I didn't know. I knew vaguely before I saw it that it was about a guy on an island and he has some relationship with a red turtle.
Yes.
Didn't know anything else, and
I knew nothing except it had cropped up in my reading as one of the most highly rated films in year-end roundups or something. That's what made me want to see it, right? a film that I don't actually remember having heard of it previously, but it kept coming up as a film to see in lists. That's all I knew of it, really.
And the other thing I knew about it before, and this was back in July, which made me want to see it, was that it was free of dialogue. And so I was interested in seeing the kind of story kind of purely told audio-visually, no dialogue.
Yes.
So the story is that a guy is shipwrecked on an island, makes some attempts to get off it, and he builds a raft. The island is kind of dense and foresty and full of... There's life on it. There's these crabs that he kind of... that sort of follow him around, which are nice. And he keeps on making rafts out of bamboo, and as he sails away from shore, something keeps destroying it. Something knocking on it from underneath breaks it up.
Yes.
Eventually, he sees that it's this giant red turtle, like the size of him.
Yes.
This thing. And then, so he faces off with this thing, and then it just swims away. He sees it on the beach. He's frustrated and angry that it's thwarted his attempts to leave. So he hits it in the head and turns it over and leaves it to die. After a few days of it just lying there on the beach, just dehydrating, he feels remorse, tries to turn it over but can't, tries to keep it alive, ultimately it dies. And then it splits in half down the middle, and a woman emerges.
Yes.
A woman with long red hair. And you go, oh, okay. So this is fantastical.
Yes.
As if it wasn't enough already. But and then he and the woman fall in love, really, and make a life together on the island, and they have a child. The child grows up, eventually leaves. The child has a relationship with some other turtles as well. Giant turtles that are just normal coloured, not red.
Yes.
And it kind of swims away with them.
Yes.
Ultimately, in old age, the guy dies, the woman grieves for him, and then turns back into a turtle.
And goes back to the sea.
Returns to the sea.
Yes.
So,
That's the plot.
That's the plot.
Uh-huh.
And it's... you don't really... I didn't know where it was going to go, at any point. I mean, I didn't know that the turtle was going to turn into a woman, for one thing. So at that point, all bets are off.
Yes.
And I found it quite enchanting. The whole time I was thinking to myself, is this kind of a dream that he's having? Like, because he's dehydrated. Is the whole film going to be, that he's kind of mad?
Yes.
Is she really a woman now?
I didn't think that because,
I don't think you're really supposed to think that. I think that's me
the film clearly delineates...
being ungenerous.
The film clearly delineates its dream sequences. So the scene where the main character is flying on the bamboo bridge,
yes.
and, there are moments where either rage or loneliness or... kind of make you go into someone's mind, and then you get like these sequences that are clearly taking place in the mind of that protagonist. And you thought, well, the thing about the turtle is not one of them.
Yes.
And actually it's quite common in these...
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't confused by that, I must say. It wasn't like I was going through the film not being able to grasp what was going on.
Yes.
I was, but underneath that all, I was still thinking, at what level am I supposed to believe in the reality of what's going on?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do, but I mean, just, as someone who has watched a lot of Ghibli films, I mean, it is quite common. They do take place in kind of fantastical worlds that, kind of are metaphorical, really, and also kind of imagined, and they're like our own, but, other kind of magical things could happen in them, and that's just part of the logic of that world. So I just took this to be a kind of a magical realist kind of thing where, it's a world where those things happen. I did wonder what the significance of it was, because, these things in these other worlds don't just take place accidentally. I mean, they are meant to convey something about our own world. So, this beautiful but destructive thing that continuously destroys your journey, right, to a safer place, that then you end up kind of killing, and then through killing it, you find the love of your life. I mean, I did kind of wonder how to read all of that, because clearly the film is about a cycle of life, isn't it?
It's the circle.
Done so much better then.
Yeah, I suppose it is. Well, it certainly is. It's clearly conveyed through the return to being a turtle. That's not accidental. That's a kind of, there's like a completion of something in that.
Yes, there's a cycle.
Yeah.
And also, the child growing up and, kind of those moments of love and family and, feeling and, then the risk of losing the child. I mean, they are meant to be like kind of almost archetypal stages in the life of someone, right?
Oh, yeah. You have like the child when it's a little toddler and it's kind of playing with stuff and eats a crab and spits it back out and falls down a thing. And there's all this kind of risk in the child's behaviour that then turns into, like, as the kid turns into an adolescent, it becomes a yearning to leave.
Yes.
And again, that's a kind of, there are these, it kind of hits these beats of what growing up stories are about.
Yes.
With the child.
I very much love the way that it was done. So, when he goes on the raft and something destroys it, and actually you're not shown what is destroying it until the third time.
That's right. Yeah.
So initially you think it might be a shark or something like really that could eat him, right? You feel a sense of danger when that happens, and actually he feels that as well, right?
I didn't, but then it is called the red turtle. I thought this is probably the turtle.
Well, it
maybe I don't know if you're
shark the first time around, right?
I suppose it could have. I don't know that you're really. I mean, I guess maybe that's just because I knew that a turtle was going to pitch up eventually.
I don't know. I felt a sense.
I think it's on the poster.
Well,
the big turtle.
A turtle is on the poster, but he goes on the raft 3 or 4 times, right? Yeah. Like so it's not. It's not stupid to think that, like, the one time it could be something else, right? Like, and actually, the turtle is not revealed to be a turtle until, like, I think on the third or.
Yeah. You don't see anything the first time. You don't know, but I think it's kind of reasonable to assume. But with that said,
okay, let me argue because it's not reasonable to assume that. So, for example, the story could have gone in a different way.
Of course, it could.
Yeah, it could have been a shark, and then the turtle rescues him, right? Like,
that's true. That's true.
So,
but what I was going to then elaborate on is actually, this is one of the reasons that I don't like knowing anything before I see films, and actually even knowing that this was a kind of minimalist tale about a guy and a turtle, even knowing that much meant that I didn't experience those scenes in the same way.
Oh, okay.
And actually it would have been better to experience them the way you did. Going, I really don't know what's happening here, because I had a pretty clear idea, which turned out to be correct, that this would be the turtle ultimately knocking on the...
Okay. I was mentioning it because I think it's characteristic of the film's narrative that often something happens, you see the protagonist dealing with it and looking at something, but actually you're not shown what that something is until considerably later. Right. And it's kind of, it's part of what the film does over and over again. And it renders it kind of, suspenseful is the wrong word, but it makes time overhang, right? And it keeps you questioning until you're shown, right? It creates a tension and a feeling, really. I mean, it's not that you're desperate to know, so it's not that kind of suspense, but you're wanting to know kind of what it is that the character is seeing, and the film is patient and lets you wait,
The film definitely kind of, it doesn't tend to clue you in ahead of time as to what it's as a kind of. So, for instance, when he's first on the island and he falls down a kind of cliff face into this pool, you really have no idea A, where he's going, or B, what's going to happen next, how he's going to get out of this. You think he must get out of this somehow, but you really don't know, and there is little kind of. Ultimately, he swims down and finds a route underneath the rocks to get out at the other side. But
even with that scene, what I loved about it is that he's shown trying to climb back through the rock and slipping, and the film is confident in letting you see that like 2 or 3 times, right? He tries climbing, and then he tries climbing again, and then he tries climbing again, and then it becomes clear that he's got to find another route or die, right? Yeah. But this willingness to like show you that, I really liked it actually. It showed a confidence in the audience, right, and also in kind of letting a mood unfold.
Yeah.
You know.
The film is patient.
Yes.
And that's one way to put it. The film, yeah, as you say, lets a mood build and is patient in allowing you to see kind of minutiae sometimes, or kind of the details of something happening, as opposed to just moving on to the next point as quickly as it can. Actually taking time to observe the character doing something. And the character is the central guy this is so beautifully animated.
Yes.
I mean, I kind of thought it reminded me of Prince of Persia, the original, as in the game, the original
right.
Prince of Persia, which was back in about 1987, I think, which was made by this guy Jordan Mechner, and it was rotoscoped. And so this guy, this Jordan Mechner, he filmed his brother kind of running and jumping and kicking, and then rotoscoped that painstakingly and made it into the game, and it gave it this really precise kind of slow animation that was very, very detailed and was clearly, each frame was absolutely different. And this really resembled that. The detail in it's a very simple kind of drawing style, right? So it's just kind of simple black lines.
Yeah.
But they are very precise, and you build a really convincing person. It's not stylized. Apart, the face is stylized. It's
Yes.
quite simple. It's just these dots for eyes. But the way the body is built is very realistic.
Yes, I like the simplicity of the line, but then the accretion of detail in things like the bamboo forest, or kind of later when the island gets washed away and you have like these long grasses, that kind
Yes.
of the family walks through. All of that seemed like very detailed, very textured.
That's the other thing I was going to say. The texture, there's a combination of the use of the lines is very simple. They're very precise, but they're not overly detailed. So you get that there's not an overabundance of detail in the way that the kind of different shapes are created. But the way that the kind of these watercolors are used to texture them it gives everything this depth kind of underneath the lines, which is beautiful.
Yeah,
it's really beautiful, especially the sea. There's so many different ways the sea looks in this. Sometimes it's dark blue. There are these kind of pools that are clear. There's green. There's red. There's a kind of magic hour thing going on in the sky, and that's all done through the colouring. The colouring is unbelievably beautiful.
I love that it was done as a silent film. I thought it was kind of very poetic, right, in the sense that everything that happens seems to happen in a condensed manner, that it has kind of various meanings, that it's pointing to something else or standing in for something else. And I love that about the film. It makes the film seem very serious and important, right? It makes it feel it's about life. Yes, and it's being told to you in this form. So I mean, I think it's an almost great film. There are a few things that bothered me, right?
I don't think it's perfect.
Yeah. So what did you what?
Well, I suppose I kind of.
What are its lacks for you?
It sounds kind of harsh to say it because we've been so complimentary about the kind of theme and liking it, but talking about it is in some ways a more enjoyable experience than watching it was, because when I was watching it, I was kind of... I wasn't directly... I wasn't feeling too emotionally affected by it. Which is not to say that that's necessarily a failure, that that's what it wanted me to do or anything, but I was watching it with what I felt was a kind of intellectual distance, which wasn't deliberate. It's not how I didn't go into thinking I will assess this movie and blah blah blah. But it didn't kind of grab me, right? I was interested the whole way through, but I wasn't connecting with it.
That's interesting. I did, except there were certain things that then distanced me. So, for example, it felt like a real... Well, it's what it is, right? It's a male point of view on something. So, which I never have problems with, right? Like, I always think that, the problem for me is not that women are represented from a male perspective necessarily. You want that, but actually the problem is that not enough women are, kind of making their own movies really, and that, that should be the focus for me. Yeah, kind of have more female perspectives on things. But it is kind of like a male perspective, right? Like this magic turtle that becomes this unknowable kind of woman, right? Like it's kind of a very vague, idealized, romantic, but also kind of, objectifying and diminishing thing, really. Like you can't have a woman; it has to be like a magical turtle woman, right? Like,
and also, I think you never, although the film doesn't do anything through dialogue, you never feel that it's suggesting what the woman wants at any point.
Never.
Yeah, the film is all about through the guy's eyes, and you're thinking about what he wants.
Yeah.
Initially, of course, before the turtle's even there, it's all about the guy, and he's been shipwrecked, and he wants to get off the island. And as the film goes on, obviously the woman is there, but the woman always seems to be, whatever she's doing is kind of informing what you think about the guy.
Yeah, I mean, the woman is just there to complete the man, really. So to create the ideal relationship and to create a son, which is significant. It's not a daughter, it's a son, right? Like, yeah, so, to support, right? To be a companion. I mean, if you really analyze it, it becomes more problematic as it goes along, right? Like, kind of, there's no sense of agency. But as I said, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the reason why I felt distance, obviously, is because I think, there are many other ways of having, like, a complete life than, to find an ideal partner and have a child and, go on to the next circle of life. I mean, kind of, lives have different circles for different people. And it's, and there are other ways of kind of, living through the blows that life gives you. Or the barriers that it kind of puts up for you, or, kind of the difficulties that one faces in life. This is kind of done, I suppose in the most conservative way possible, right? Which is, through the nuclear family, really. So all of that I found kind of less than ideal for me, or less than imaginative for me, right? So I suppose those would be kind of my reservations, and they have to do just in terms of the way that the project is conceptualized to begin with, really. So I think, given that it is conceptualized in that way, it's realized very beautifully. Yeah.
I think this, I kind of realised maybe what the largest problem of the film is for me, which is that I think it's difficult to actually really directly discuss the themes. I think we're talking about it around the edges, about saying, well, the film could have been this, or the film is, kind of being conservative. But actually, in terms of trying to really grasp onto the film in a concrete way, saying, okay, so why is it a turtle, and why does a turtle turn to a woman, this sort of thing. I think that's really hard, and I think actually, having to discuss the film in terms of vagaries is dissatisfying, and I think I don't have a clear idea of what the film really wants to convey.
Oh, well,
which is difficult.
I don't have that problem. I mean, I think the turtle woman is the problem, right? Because everything else to me has a kind of a logic, right? So kind of life is depicted as the shipwreck of a storm, which are kind of is understandable, right? And kind of a protagonist tries to find a safer shore, right, or a return to whence he came, which is never made clear, and he struggles and fails, and he struggles and fails, and he struggles and fails, and that's kind of, you can see there's a metaphor for life, really, and then kind of he resigns himself to what is in fact an oasis, right, and, within that oasis, he finds that whom he had thought to be his biggest enemy is in fact his life's companion, and there's a metamorphosis that goes through that, and then there's a moment of joy and bliss in finding companionship and in forming a family and in seeing a child grow up, right? And then some storm comes out of nowhere and destroys everything that you've built up. Right? And kind of, and in fact, the people who come to your aid when life has completely, ruined you and made you collapse is actually your wife and particularly your child, right? Who kind of, goes to extremes to kind of, bring you back from, the point of drowning and kind of bring you to shore. And then kind of you're nurtured and taken care of by your wife and child, until, kind of you die, basically, and, the child leaves, or the child leaves and then you die, one of the two. I mean, it is kind of a metaphor or for an idea of life, anyway.
Yes, yeah. What, very eloquent.
Thank you, sir.
Very nice. What did you make of the crabs?
Oh, I thought the crabs were lovely. I mean, I thought the crabs, well, first of all, they're like a humorous punctuation.
They really made me laugh. In fact, I was in a cinema with 10 other people, and there's one point where the crabs... So there are these kind of 4 crabs that hang around the fella when he first gets there, and they're kind of nervous of him, and he feeds them a little bit, and eventually they start kind of following him around, and they're like these little... They're like a Greek chorus, almost.
Yes, they are, yeah.
That hang around and start getting into everything. And at one point when he's overturned the turtle and he decides, I've got to go and get it some water, he picks up a little kind of bamboo cup that he's got to rush off and get some water. And as he runs off, he kind of tips it upside down and the crabs fall out. And I really laughed. I laughed loudly at that bit. It was really, really funny. And no one else in the cinema did. I felt really disappointed.
Oh, well, I found the crabs funny.
I love them.
But also kind of, they were not just funny. Right, because they were used as a way of making the vagaries of life unsentimental, right? So, there was that bit where the fish, is in a little puddle, whatever, and the crab comes in and brings it to eat, right? Or, and then like a crab...
They start picking at it.
Yeah, and then the crab itself gets eaten by a seagull, and... Right, like,
yes,
right.
That made me laugh as well.
Yeah. So, kind of it's there in a way to kind of, bring humor, but also a kind of, to indicate a level of the harshness of nature, really,
Yeah.
So I thought that was all kind of really great. I mean, the one plot point that really befuddled me, more than the turtle woman that I just took as a given. Yeah, it was a kind of a leap in...
Yeah, that's the central point of suspension of disbelief. You have to go along with it.
You go along with it. But what I didn't get was the fire. Right?
Okay. What, burning all the bamboo after the storm?
Yeah, because I thought, well, it's never been indicated that he had access to fire in the whole thing. I mean, why not grill a fish? Right?
I suppose there is that. I mean, actually, it was weird. Interestingly, about 30 seconds before the fire, I was thinking to myself, there's not been any fire in this film.
Yes.
Weirdly. And then it just showed up at that point, and it's in when they're kind of... this tsunami has ravaged the island, and they kind of burn all the waste as a kind of, I guess, to start a kind of renewal process, to kind of get rid of everything old and start with the new. But I mean, you're right. It's never been shown that he has kind of got the wherewithal to learn how to cook.
Yes.
But I don't necessarily. I mean,
it would have been good.
I think that heightens the impact of the fire when it does show up. It's that much more. I mean, basically, you've never, apart from a few kind of sunsets, you haven't really seen the colour, and obviously in the turtle, you haven't really seen the colour red all that much in the film. It's much more. It's green and it's blue and it's the kind of sand is sand coloured. Something And so when the fire comes in and it's accompanied by a loud, the sound of a burning bonfire, it's that much harsher.
It is, but I don't know. Maybe it's my own expectations, but the film does have a Robinson Crusoe kind of a backstory, right? Or the type of story that it's in the tradition of is the Robinson Crusoe story, right? A man gets shipwrecked on an island and has got to survive, right? And you see him getting water, and you see him finding food,
Yeah.
right? And the next thing that they always show is getting fire, right? Because,
Sure.
and so actually I thought not showing us how he makes fire and then having a big, fire at the end, I didn't like it.
Fair enough. I didn't have a problem with that. It's interesting. It's interesting thinking about those other shipwreck stories, like Castaway or whatever, where it's kind of always those stories are man versus environment and learning to cope in a harsh sort of world. And this film starts off with elements of that, and he's just trying to escape at the start, and he's learning to. But actually, it doesn't really take him very much effort to learn to live on this island, right?
Yes.
He seems pretty much comfortable straight away. It's not like he gets there and then is tortured by a world that he can't cope with.
Yes.
He knows what he's doing, basically, and he just wants to get off the island. He doesn't find it difficult to make a raft. The island is full of resources, full of food, full of water. So it's not a kind of struggle against the environment, really.
No.
Which I think is slightly novel.
That's a
for film
really
like this.
interesting point and an important point. It's not a struggle against the environment. It's a struggle to live or for life, right? Like
it's a struggle to thrive instead of survive.
I suppose it's a struggle to make the best life possible in the circumstances that you're given. That's what the struggle is, right? Because I think throughout all of the beginning, what you really feel is his loneliness.
Yes.
And his strivings that come to naught, right? Like the building of the raft and the trying to find a better place or going to a better place or going away from that place, and like each effort doomed, right? By this turtle, who I haven't kind of figured out what that means. Right?
It's like that. There's that triangle you get of like human needs. We've seen that. I think it's from the 70s or something. And at the bottom, it's things like shelter and food, and then above that, it's companionship, and above that, it's self-fulfillment. It's like, and once you've got everything on the bottom level, you can have all the stuff on the next one, and so on and so forth. So it's like, and all these Castaway films are based on getting all the stuff on the bottom level at first.
Yes.
And in this film, he doesn't have to bother with that. The film is more interested in the higher level, the higher ideals of what makes him happy.
You're right. But still the fire felt like dissonant to me. I wanted to know how he'd come by fire.
Why do you think the turtle kept breaking his raft? I struggled with this question. I was thinking about, does the turtle hate him? Does the turtle love him?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I kind of... I just personally did not think that the turtle was against him in the raft. I mean, I just imagined that the raft was very flimsy, and kind of a turtle behind it, kind of going up to see what was above, would tumbled it. So I thought it was like, because there's no sense of the turtle being aggressive. Right, and in fact, when he does tumble and he sees the turtle just stares, whereas he's waiting for an attack that never happens. So I kind of I didn't take the turtle as being aggressive.
That's very interesting, because that is exactly what I thought. When you talk about the raft being flimsy, I mean, I thought the raft looked fairly sturdy, and actually it took quite some effort to destroy it. It took a few hits. It didn't seem to be idle curiosity on the turtle's part that hit it and know it broke. It took a few goes to destroy it, and it happened more than once.
Yes, well, it happened three times. But you notice.
But then you're right. The turtle does just hang there in the water, looking at him, and then just leaves. It's not like once it's stopped him from leaving, it's achieved its goal. That's what I took from it.
Okay, that's interesting, yes.
And it didn't matter what he did next. He just didn't want it to go.
Yes, well, you may, kind of, I mean, that could work with my interpretation as well. I certainly didn't see it as an attack, right? I mean, you do see it as an attack in this, but, well, you see that something destroys the raft, right? And it could be an attack initially. And then what happens is he builds a sturdier raft, and then a sturdier one still, you know, and kind of, you know, they're not the turtle overpowers each of them. But yeah, kind of, I just read that kind of metaphorically as like life dragging you back, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But it
but,
does have-
but without evil intent necessarily, the way that life tends to do, like shit happens, right? And it's not necessarily like somebody trying to prevent you from doing something. It's just
Oh sure, but the turtle is, you know, it's the turtle has a brain and has some agency and isn't, you know what I mean? Like it's making a decision. I think.
Is it though? I mean, you know, I'm not saying that it's not.
No, sure. This is the question. I mean, I think if it was like if he kept trying to get off the island and he kept on running into storms that broke his raft, then I think that will be a stronger indication or a stronger metaphor for, you know, life stopping you. But the idea of something with decision making power, you know, preventing you, is not the same.
Maybe, or it could just be nature, because there is something about the turtle, right? Because when they have a child, the child swims with turtles, right? Yeah. So there is also a sense of, you know, the hybridity or of the child, that he's part turtle and part human, say. You know, that it gives him a different perspective and a different point of view and a different way of maneuvering in the world, at sea and on land. So, but I don't know how to interpret that.
No, it's right. He's comfortable with the turtle. He joins them. He sees some giant turtles swimming around and just joins them, and they just. I mean, as turtles don't really have facial expressions, but they seem to accept him or at least aren't bothered by him. And later on, obviously, has a friendship with them because they help him look for his dad after the storm.
He's part of them somehow.
Yeah. And eventually they help him leave, don't they?
Right. They do. He leaves with them.
He lives with them.
You know, so he leaves to explore another world with the turtles. How that's interpreted, I'm not sure.
Yeah. I struggle to grasp onto certain parts of it, but it's kind of, it's wonderfully rewarding just to watch, though.
Yes. You know? I mean, I think it's wonderfully rewarding to see an animated film that isn't trying to sell you something, and that is actually poetical, you know, and it is very actively trying to convey a mood and a feeling, and kind of through that, kind of give you a meaningful experience, right? And, you know, one that you can't necessarily like pin down and say, you know, it's X. It's partly meaningful because actually you can't quite grasp all the details, really. Yeah.
It made me really think about movement as well. Just thinking about the animation, like, because it's so spare, and the movement is so detailed that the way things do move and the amount that they move was really interesting to me. So, when the turtle is dying, lying on its back, the fact that it doesn't move and it's just a still image it's kind of more impactful than doing something in live action, or that was trying to look like live action would be, because it is just pure stillness. That there is nothing moving, and then when something does eventually move, you know, the turtle kind of transforms into this woman and her hand moves, like that tiny, just a couple of pixels and a couple of frames of movement mean everything.
Yes.
And because it's in comparison to the way that you can just literally have nothing move when you're animating stuff.
I mean, I think it's a wonderful question in cinema in general, right? Because, you know, the whole purpose is to make things meaningful, right? And actually just putting more or cutting quicker or putting more things in the frame, you know, doesn't necessarily make it more meaningful, right? I think it's just, kind of more is not better, right? And I think kind of this is a textbook example of that, you know, on the value of stillness and kind of sparseness and kind of, you know, giving meaning to like the slightest, gesture.
Yeah. I really loved Night as well. The way that was stripped down, the way it was stripped of colour. Night just became black and white.
Yes.
Which was a brilliant, you know, I mean, there's not really much to say about it, but it was just a really great way of delineating day from night and showing it as this kind of romantic, different world.
Mm.
You know, that everything just became monochrome once it was nighttime.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's true of the film as a whole. Like, kind of, each scene, yeah, which is kind of, drawn differently, right? So, you know, the scenes in the forest, or the scenes of the storm, or, you know, the scenes where you see the fields, or, kind of, they're all rendered meaningful, right? Like, kind of, you know, the image is drawn to kind of convey, you know, a feeling and a mood, right? And it's very successful in doing that.
Mm.
It's very beautifully thought through. It's very beautifully drawn, you know, to evoke.
And you can tell, I guess, the care that's been put into it, and the level of work, which in itself is just a pleasure to see.
Yes.
And to experience. You can tell how much work has gone into it, and whether you kind of like or feel that you understand what's going on or not, it's a real pleasure to see something that you can tell has been worked on very, very hard.
Yes.
You know, as simple as that sounds.
Yes. Everything kind of, you know, has been thought through with great skill. I think that needs to be emphasized.
That you kind of go, even if I don't get this, it definitely means something, and that in itself is nice.
Yeah. Well, as opposed to last week's viewing on The Disaster Artist, where you see the camera wobbling all over the place, and you think, why is the camera wobbling all over the place? And you realize, well, there's no fucking reason. You know, they just haven't thought it through. They can wobble it, and that's what they're doing, right?
Yeah. Which is not to say that wobbly camera is bad. I mean, for instance, if you look at like Paul Greengrass, I think he uses wobbly camera brilliantly because he kind of snatches images in a way that is informative and conveys a mood.
What I'm getting at is this thing that you were saying about it being thought through. You know, if it's a choice that's made for expressive purposes, fine, you know. But actually, you know, sometimes it doesn't seem to be a choice. It just seems to be like an afterthought, right? Like you're doing something else, and the camera wobbles. And and yet the viewer's trying to think, why is the camera wobbling? And actually, it's just wobbling because it wants to get to that face. Right, that's
I know
all.
what you mean. Yeah, like not an afterthought necessarily, but not even a thought at all. Like you just go, we want to show this scene, and you've concentrated on the script and the actors and the blocking, and the camera is kind of just the way we'll capture it.
Yeah, exactly.
As opposed to something that's integral.
Yeah, so this is I think a real contrast to that, because everything seems kind of purposeful and patterned.
Yeah.
Okay, we better end it there. But go see it if you get a chance, and if you don't get a chance to see it someplace, it is available on Amazon, which we probably shouldn't publicize.
Well, not until they pay us. Well, you got it from Amazon. I imagine it's. I mean, well, you got it on streaming, right? So it'll be in shops, I guess. It'll now be on Blu-ray.
Exactly. Yes, it will. Okay, it's
And
on Blu-ray.
And it's nice.
Good.